Order, please. We'll call today's session to order. Before we start the daily routine, I'll read the late debate under Rule 5.5. It reads as follows. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating the Premier and the Minister of Health in receiving their medical degree, as obviously they know more about the treatment of MS using the liberation treatment than Dr. Paolo Samboni. Doctors in the United States, Poland, Jordan, and Kuwait, and the current use of the procedure to treat other maladies in Canada. That will be debated at the hour of interruption. The daily routine, presenting and reading petitions. No petitions today. Presenting reports of committees. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Law Amendments, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bill. Bill number 1, an act to establish a management commission for the effective administration of the House of Assembly. The committee recommends this bill to a favourable consideration of the House with certain amendments.
Order this bill be referred to the Committee on the Whole House on Bills. Any further reports of committees? Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise as Minister responsible for Part 1 of the Gaming Control Act. I'm pleased to announce today the launch of a process to develop a new responsible gaming strategy for the province of Nova Scotia for the period 2011 to 2016. The last gaming strategy was released in April 2005 and was intended to be a 5-year plan. It was the first fully integrated gaming strategy for Nova Scotia and indeed in Canada. Now that the initial 5-year period is ended, it is time to revisit and rethink our approach to gaming for the next 5 years. In developing a new gaming strategy, we will review some of the same elements outlined in the 2005 strategy, such as the business of gaming, problem gambling prevention and treatment, research, and accountability. We will also look at a number of other aspects of gaming that are new or more prominent in 2010, including internet gambling, the video lottery MyPlay system, also known as the Informed Player Choice System or IPCS, and the governance model for gaming in Nova Scotia. The internet is undeniably the biggest influence in the industry today. There are more than 2,500 offshore internet gaming sites operating. In addition, there are thousands of applications for mobile devices. In the last 6 months, more than half of the provinces in this country have indicated that they are evaluating or moving forward with internet gaming. This is something that needs to be reviewed with a continued focus on economic sustainability and social responsibility. Ignoring it is not an option. Just as we're seeing growth in internet gaming, we're also seeing new responsible gaming and prevention technology, with Nova Scotia often at the forefront of these innovations. With respect to First Nations gaming, I recently met with the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs and outlined my interest in renewing the gaming strategy. We will engage with the Assembly on the key questions being considered in the development of the strategy and on the future of gaming in Nova Scotia. I wish to stress that any changes to the existing gaming agreements with the Mi'kmaq people will be done through a respectful negotiation process and may take longer to conclude than other aspects of the gaming strategy. The development of the strategy will be led by Ron Lesperance, a former Deputy Minister in the provincial government. We are pleased to have someone of Mr. Lesperance's caliber to lead this important project. He is familiar with government policy development and is experienced in consulting with a wide range of stakeholders. Mr. Lesperance previously served as Deputy Minister for the Departments of Environment and Labour, Economic Development, and Community Services. Mr. Lesperance will work with an advisory committee of Deputy Ministers from the Departments of Finance, Health, Health Promotion and Protection, and Labour and Workforce Development, as well as the CEOs of the Office of Aboriginal Affairs and the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation. These departments and agencies will provide administrative support to the project leader to ensure the process is well organized and completed in a timely manner. Development of the strategy will be informed by research into best practices in other jurisdictions, stakeholder meetings, and written submissions. I wish to emphasize that there will be plenty of opportunity for public input and for all stakeholders to be heard. It is our intention that the new gaming strategy will be released this fall. We look forward to the participation of all interested members of this House and of the public as we develop this province's next responsible gaming strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to first thank the Minister for providing an advance copy of his ministerial statement on the Gaming Act. After avoiding multiple questions in the House, it is good to see that at least the Minister has begun the process for the next 5-year gaming strategy. It is interesting to note that the Minister has given no indication of the successes or failures of the last 5-year gaming strategy. Minister notes that the Internet is the biggest influence in the industry today, and it is an undeniable force and an issue that needs to be addressed by government if the province is to have a relevant strategy. But we cannot forget that while the amount of people who choose to use older technologies such as VLTs has declined, the amount that players spend has gone up. Problem gambling in this province is still a problem. In 2005, the Premier thought it was enough of a problem that he tabled a bill that would let Nova Scotians have their say on VLTs. However, it is clear that since taking power, the NDP has changed their mind. In developing this process, the Minister has chosen Mr. Ron L'Esperance to take the lead. Mr. L'Esperance is an experienced leader in policy development. In the development of this new strategy, a look back over the last 5 years is an important place to start. You have to know where you come from if you want to understand where we need to go. We have to know we have had success in the past 5 years, but it is also essential that we truly understand our failures. As overall rates of VLT use go down, can we abandon those people that have problems with these machines? Will any of our past practices be of any use in addressing the issue of internet gambling? How does a provincial jurisdiction monitor and enforce rules in an international online world where the next hand of cards or the next spin of the wheel is only as far as your cell phone? The Minister talked about seeking out research. The Department of Labour and Workforce Development is withholding research on this very subject. It would be a mistake and a monumental disappointment if this Minister continues to suppress information as we move forward on this very important discussion. After taking many questions in the House, the Minister has finally started this process in the dying hours of this session, but he has left many more questions unanswered. How is the process of consultation going to take place? What stakeholders will participate? How wide will the public consultation be? Will this be another well-managed public relations strategy, or will there be meaningful debate for a change? The next 5-year strategy will chart a course for our province, and that is why it is so important that this government finally face up to the hard questions, put politics aside for once, and do what is right for all Nova Scotians with an open and transparent debate on the future of gambling in our province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it gives me great privilege to stand here today and to say a few words. And I want to thank first the Minister for providing me with a copy of the statement beforehand. And the issue before us is a very important issue, and it was said in April of 2005, that in 5 years' time we would review the strategy, and here we are today getting ready to do that. And I congratulate the Minister for doing that. It's important that we have a measured response, and consultation takes place with the various stakeholder groups. Public consultation is key in this matter because, Mr. Speaker, this issue has an impact on pretty near every family in Nova Scotia. And to determine the feelings of Nova Scotians on the matter, we need to find out how they have been affected, negatively or positively. And we need to know what they feel should be done about the current system and what's the best way to find a path to move forward. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that the process will take and the responses of people given the public consultation will be longer than a minute as they were in Back to Basic. But that being said, having a person of Ron Lesbron's caliber to look over this process and to be the one to help guide it through the system and over the summer until the fall till we get the final report is a good thing. So our caucus is eagerly awaiting to see what is going to happen, how the process unfolds, and we are interested in working with the government to find solutions that will work for all Nova Scotians. As I've already said, but it is worth repeating, the best way to find those solutions is through the public consultation process. So I thank you today for your time and look forward to hearing more from the government on this very important project.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to present the first annual accountability report on emergency departments for our province. This report provides accurate, reliable information that will support the right decisions for Nova Scotian families. Mr. Speaker, this is another promise made, another promise kept, action on our platform commitment to improve ministerial accountability for emergency departments. As well, this is another element of our 4-year plan to make health care better for families in every region. Mr. Speaker, I introduced the Emergency Department Closures Accountability Act in October of 2009. It came into effect January 1st, 2010. This legislation requires district health authorities to consult with communities about emergency room closures so they could help shape solutions. I want to thank the more than 1,400 Nova Scotians who attended these meetings and shared their thoughts, their worries, and their suggestions. The legislation also requires that data on emergency rooms be collected and shared. In 2009-10, emergency departments in 38 hospitals across the province were open 94% of the time. 25 of the 38 hospitals had no closures over the past year. 13 hospitals did experience closures, totaling 19,116 hours. The data in this report provides government, district health authorities, and Nova Scotians with a complete provincial picture of our emergency departments, which was never fully visible before. Because leadership is about sharing information openly, so everyone knows the extent of the challenge and can help shape the solutions. Before 2009, we did not have an integrated, reliable system for collecting and reporting on meaningful information. Dr. John Ross highlighted this problem in his April interim report. And Mr. Speaker, Dr. Ross has joined us today in our East Gallery. I'm pleased to say, Mr. Speaker, that this accountability report establishes the baseline for consistent data collection on emergency departments moving forward. That, Mr. Speaker, is accountability. Of course, there are other important elements within our plan to make health care better for families. In September 2009, our government announced Dr. John Ross as the provincial advisor on emergency care. This accountability report will provide Dr. Ross with the provincial data he needs to inform his recommendations. Mr. Speaker, my government also allocated $3 million in the budget for an emergency department protection fund, and we are opening more beds which will help patients move forward through the emergency departments. Ministerial accountability for emergency departments, the appointment of a provincial advisor to lead emergency care improvements, and collaboration among government, district health authorities and communities are the right steps for improving access to emergency health care and to making life better for families in every region. Mr. Speaker, it's been my privilege to work toward improving emergency health care in Nova Scotia, to receive Dr. Ross's interim report and the data from the district health authorities, and to provide this accountability report to the members of the House of Assembly. And Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to acknowledge the staff in the department who worked very hard on putting this report together. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to continuing this work so families have an emergency health care system that provides patient safety and quality health care in every region of our beautiful province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. And I'll now recognize the Honourable Member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me pleasure to rise and say a few words about the accountability report that the Minister has introduced here in the House today. And certainly we are happy to see it. When we passed the bill last fall, when the entire legislature saw that bill go through, there was a commitment made that there would be an annual reporting and that the figures would be made available to all of the members of the House. And we appreciate that. We had expected it, and we're glad to see it here in a timely fashion. And we also highly respect the work that's being done by Dr. Ross. We know that he's being thorough in traveling the province and really getting a sense of the different issues in different corners of the province. It's not surprising, Mr. Speaker, that really the closures are limited to a small number of hospitals, disproportionately, no question about it. I think there's 13 hospitals out of the 38 where we're seeing the closures happening, and we know that in the communities that are served there is a lot of anxiety and concern. And I think the new aspect of asking the DHAs to consult with people in their communities is a positive one, and I'm sure that that's been done in a very fulsome way, in a way that people can speak freely and that their views can be heard and their suggestions, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, because we know that if you talk to people in a community, they've looked at the problem and they can understand what the issues are and they can be a part of the solutions. So I'm very pleased to see that that's now not just something that could be done, but is a requirement to be done. And interesting to note that the Minister said 1,400 Nova Scotians participated in those discussions with the DHAs. So that is positive in itself. In terms of the closures, the hours were 19,116 hours of closures. According to my calculations, 68% of those closures would have been since the NDP had become government beginning in June of this year. So, or June a year ago, the last June 11th. So, you know, again, it's fairly evenly spread through the year, although there is a majority falling in the NDP government time. What I'd like to suggest is that in the information that's gathered, because I fully understand the Minister saying good information allows for good decision making, I'd like to see that we also gather the information on the waiting times that people experience when they go to the emergency rooms. I think that's just as much a part of accountability as the closures, and just to be sure that the communities that are experiencing excessive waits, that have busy regional hospitals, that they're also being included in the information gathering, because what we need to know is where we need more resources and how we take this baseline information and match it to the available resources, be it doctors, nurses, paramedics, and so on. And, you know, as a Halifax MLA, I feel it's important to note that closures of emergency rooms is not a problem in our metro area or in Sydney. Well, it is in the Sydney greater area, but not Sydney regional. But the fact is that for people in those areas, they want to know, what are you going to do about excessive waiting periods, about people who come to the emergency room and then turn around, you know, 6 hours later and go home untreated. And those questions are very paramount to many of the people in Nova Scotia. So I'd like to point that out, and again remind the minister that the idea of a locums that could match the resources, the medical and staff resources, to those, you know, now documented and recognized closures would be going a long way for the next steps which we have to take in this process. So gathering the information is a good first step, and we need to know what you're going to do next in terms of matching resources. And I hope you will go back to the Liberal suggestion of a locums list and, you know, and have it centrally managed. On the $3 million Emergency Department Protection Fund, I would only say that we need to know what's in that. We did have questions during estimates. We know that money's been set aside in anticipation of action, but the members of the legislature and certainly the members of the Liberal caucus would like to know, you know, what details are being planned in terms of actually making some difference with this $3 million. Hopefully it will go a long way to helping, but we want to know what it's all about. Right now it's just a line item in the budget. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, you know, we certainly are pleased to see that there's higher accountability, greater participation of Nova Scotians in the small communities and large communities of the province to speak to their DHAs about this issue, which has been very paramount to many, many communities. And, you know, we hope that it won't stop here, that this is just the first step in then going forward with solutions and matching resources to the closures that are clearly documented. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And I'll recognize the honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to thank the minister for having a copy of her statement a couple hours prior, so we could have a quick look at it. It's my privilege to rise today in response to this statement, and I know this information is important to addressing the emergency room problem in Nova Scotia. District health authorities across Nova Scotia already release emergency room closure notices to the public. And as a former Minister of Health, I always had access to which hospitals were closed and how many hours they were closed. So all the minister is doing is disclosing the number of total closure hours. Will the information be posted online in an easy to access manner for Nova Scotians to see? If we want to talk about openness and transparency, rather than just presenting them here once a year, let's have it online so everyone can see it. The minister discussed the consultation that the district health authorities held with Nova Scotians in a variety of communities around the province. Supposedly 1,400 people came to the community consultations. Now, Mr. Speaker, I was only aware of the one held in Shelburne, and I'd really like to know where and when these meetings were held, what was discussed at these meetings, and because these facts seem to be unsubstantiated to me. And I know I canvassed the rest of my colleagues, and they weren't aware of these meetings as well. The emergency room data is to be collected and shared, and I see you have collected it, which is something that has been occurring for several years, at least since I was in the portfolio. But who will get to share the data? Will it be distributed publicly on the Department of Health website, hospital by hospital, with the number of ER closures, month by month? And the reason for the ER closure. As the minister and the NDP are talking about transparency and ministerial accountability, that would be a really good move forward. I'd also like to know a little more about what the criteria was used for the total of 19,116 hours of ER closures in the 13 emergency rooms in Nova Scotia during the 09-10 season. I know that the Fisherman's Memorial Hospital in Lunenburg, which was one of the NDP's focuses during the 2009 election, does not count the nightly closures that happen 7 days a week from 10:30 to 7:30 as closure hours. The NDP used it as a closure hours during the election campaign. In Lunenburg, as opposed to other ERs, that problem is not doctor staffing, but nurses. So, Mr. Speaker, again, having it available and knowing exactly why these things are happening would be good. Nova Scotians were promised more by the NDP government last spring, and as health critic, I will hold them account to their provinces to keep all emergency rooms open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as was stated by the Premier on many times on the campaign trail. Mr. Speaker, now that we know and have a set number on the size of this problem, I look forward to seeing something of substance come forward that will stop the number of closures that plague the communities of Digby, North Sydney, Lunenburg, New Waterford, and Glace Bay on a regular basis. And I'm sure knowing the fact that their ERs are closed is cold comfort to the people who are seeking medical treatment in those communities. So, Mr. Speaker, even though I look at this as a very positive step of moving forward on ER closures, there is still a lot of work to be done, and we look forward to more constructive things to come from this NDP. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. Are there any further statements by ministers? If not, I'll recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the members. I'd like to draw members' attention to the East Gallery. We have some guests from my constituency, and a very special group of people, Mr. Speaker. This is the Cobequid 4-H group. And their leaders are Wanda Hamilton, who is the general leader, and I'll ask everybody to stand as I say your name. Joanne Solway, photography leader and 4-H parent. Lexi Ettinger, Luke Ettinger, Brooke Hamilton, Brittany Hamilton, Blake Hamilton, Emily Solway Ferguson, and Mary Solway Ferguson, and Tyler Crow, and I ask the members of the House to give them a warm reception.
We welcome all our guests here this afternoon and hope they enjoy the proceedings as they unfold. Government notices of motion. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas lobster fisherman Mark Taylor of Centerville, Kings County, and his crew of 2 were on board the Eric and Junior 3 Monday afternoon when the 11-meter wooden lobster boat started taking on water in Scotts Bay near Cape Split. And whereas a Canadian Coast Guard auxiliary vessel and a Cormorant search and rescue helicopter from Greenwood were dispatched to rescue the crew of the sinking vessel with the support from a Hercules aircraft that was training in the area at the time. And whereas a search and rescue technician from the Cormorant chopper was lowered to the deck of the boat and hoisted the 3 fishermen to safety moments before the sinking vessel disappeared beneath the icy waters of the Bay of Fundy. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislature recognize the dangerous job of a lobster fisherman and thank the crew on board the Canadian Coast Guard ship and the Cormorant and the Hercules aircraft for their heroic efforts in rescuing the crew of the Eric and Junior 3. Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice of passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, whereas our legislative session runs smoothly thanks only to the amazing staff who operate within and outside the chamber, and whereas this includes the hardworking legislative council staff, the staff of the Speaker's office, the efficient Hansard and legislative library personnel, the tireless pages and their managers, Michael and Peter, the staff of Ledge TV, and the faithful advisors in the clerk's office. And whereas those behind the scenes who keep things moving also include the loyal staff in 3 caucus offices, the Premier's office, as well as Ledge Committee's office, along with tremendous efforts of both the catering and cleaning staff in the legislature, all kept in line by diligent commissioners and staff and Sergeant at Arms. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House salute these fantastic individuals and teams who ensure that the work in this historic chamber runs orderly and effectively, regardless of hour of day or task at hand, and wish them all a wonderful summer. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Acadian Affairs.
Monsieur le Président, à une date ultérieure, je demanderai l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que la Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse a offert en cadeau au ministre des Affaires acadiennes une reproduction encadrée d'une carte de la région de la rivière Annapolis datant de 1757, attendu que la carte représente un bien historique rare pour la communauté parce qu'elle montre l'emplacement des villages acadiens, y compris ceux de la région de Belle-Île, durant la période de la déportation, aussi appelée le Grand Dérangement, et attendu que demain, le 12 mai 2010, la carte sera dévoilée et installée en permanence à l'étage principal de Province House. Par conséquent, il est résolu que les membres de l'Assemblée législative remercient la Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse de son cadeau et réitèrent leur engagement envers la préservation et la promotion de la langue et de la culture des Acadiens. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse has presented to the Minister of Acadian Affairs the gift of a mounted reproduction of a map of the Annapolis River area dating from 1757, and whereas this map represents a rare historical asset for the community because it shows the placement of Acadian villages, including those in the Belle-Île region during the time of the deportation or Great Upheaval. And whereas tomorrow, May 12, 2010, the map will be unveiled and placed on permanent display on the main floor of Province House. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly thanks the Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse for its gift of a mounted reproduction of a map of the Annapolis River area dating from 1757 and affirms its commitment to the preservation and promotion of Acadian language and culture. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that at the end of my resolution I be permitted to make a introduction, please.
Certainly.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Nova Scotia, the Ecology Action Centre, and the Department of Health Promotion and Protection are working to revitalize a culture of walking in the province through the Heart and Stroke Walkabout, a 5-year initiative with a long-term goal of increasing the number of Nova Scotians who walk 30 to 60 minutes most days. And whereas on May the 13th, Emily Forrest will embark on the Forest Walkabout Challenge, a 75-day, 2,995 kilometre walk along the Nova Scotia coastline to raise awareness of the Heart and Stroke Walkabout and Brigadoon Children's Camp. And whereas it is important for everyone to have a positive role model that inspires us to get active and journey to better health and well-being, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Emily Forrest, wish her well on the Forest Walkabout Challenge, and encourage all Nova Scotians to join Emily in her goal of creating a healthier Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, in our East Gallery this afternoon, we're joined by Emily Forrest, and she will be leaving from the skateboard park Thursday morning at 7:30 along Quinpool Road, and I invite any of the members to come out and walk with Emily those first few steps, and I would ask her to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
The Honourable Minister of African and Nova Scotian Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Henderson Paris ended his annual Pictou County Run Against Racism in 2009 after 20 years of success. And whereas on Thursday, May the 6th, Pictou County started a new tradition in honor of Mr. Paris's legacy with the Marathon of Respect and Equality. And whereas throughout the 26-mile run, participants also rallied with passerbys to spread a message of respect and equality. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House commend the residents of Pictou County for their dedication by continuing the hard work of Henderson Paris and for being committed to spreading a message of respect and equality. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, first could I have an introduction, please?
Certainly.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to the House a special guest in the East Gallery. Ms. Sarah Craig was with the Department of Environment's fall co-op student, and she distinguished herself by completing a greenhouse gas emission inventory along with other projects beneficial to the department and the province as a whole. And I will be introducing a resolution to honor her in a few moments, and I want to say a special welcome on behalf of all members.
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Government of Nova Scotia supports the professional development of our university students through the employment of co-op students through our Career Start program, and whereas the Department of Environment fall co-op student Sarah Craig distinguished herself by completing a greenhouse gas emission inventory along with other projects beneficial to the department and the province as a whole. And whereas Sarah Craig was recognized as Dalhousie Co-op Student of the Year for 2009 and as one of the Chronicle Herald's top 20 in their 20s for her work for the department. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Sarah Craig for her recognitions and for her hard work and dedication to her job while with the Department of Environment. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Any further notices of motion? The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May 12th, the Nova Scotia Gambia Association will mark its 25th African Dinner and Auction. And whereas the Nova Scotia Gambia Association is one of the province's most successful and long-standing international development non-governmental organizations, and whereas the work of the association is acclaimed internationally for the positive impact it has created amongst marginalized groups in West Africa, focusing its programs on education and health issues related to HIV/AIDS, malaria prevention, landmine safety, and peer education in secondary schools. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House wish the Nova Scotia Gambia Association much success at their 25th anniversary dinner and auction being held on May 12th, and offer them congratulations on their continued efforts to make a difference in Africa. Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Red Cross is one of the leading humanitarian organizations through which people voluntarily demonstrate their caring for others in need, and whereas Dennis Holland, the Department of Health's Senior Director of Policy Planning and Legislation, has been a Red Cross volunteer for 12 years, and whereas Dennis is a past president of the Nova Scotia region of the Canadian Red Cross, a past president of the Red Cross's Atlantic Zone, and a long-standing member of the Canadian Red Cross's National Board of Governors, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Dennis Holland on being made a member of the Order of the Red Cross. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Introduction of bills. Notices of motion. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Alexa McDonough enjoyed a 30-year career in politics, both provincially and federally, was the first woman to lead a recognized political party in Canada, and is a strong advocate for women in politics. And whereas Alexa brought her many talents and broad experience to Mount St. Vincent University as the interim president for 2009-2010. And whereas the staff, administration, alumni, students, and faculty have welcomed her great interest and support for the many facets of the university, and have appreciated her ability to lead them forward in many initiatives. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House acknowledge Alexa McDonough for her dedicated service as interim president of Mount St. Vincent University, and wish her a long-lasting relationship with the university after she steps down on September 30th, 2010. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with your permission, I would like to do an introduction prior to the resolution.
Certainly.
Thank you. I'd like to draw the members' attention to the gallery opposite, where we have members of Local 721, the International Union of Operating Engineers, who are here to join us, and John Payne, Don Dixon, Angela McLean, Betty Murray, and Karen Code, and Ted Crockett, and they are here to watch the proceedings of the House today. And I'd like to give them a warm welcome.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas an arbitrator ruled in June 2009 that resident care workers at Townsview Estates in Truro were performing duties equivalent to higher paid positions, and whereas the Department of Health in a letter to the administration of Townsview stated that the department would be increasing their funding to provide the new rate of pay for these staff, and whereas members from Local 721 seeking fair treatment attended the April 14th, 2010 session of this House, and to date, no resolution has been found. Therefore, be it resolved that the NDP government take steps to ensure that the resident care workers at Townsview Estates immediately receive their pay equity. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
No. There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? No. I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I might be permitted to make an introduction before I read my resolution.
Sure.
Thank you. In the East Gallery, we have students and teachers from Bicentennial School in Dartmouth. And as I call your name, I wonder if you could stand, and then I'll ask my colleagues to give you a warm welcome. Zachary Sampang, Jack Walford, Dylan Jackson, Janico Downey, Corlin Romans, Ryan Joyce, Ivan Vasilev, Matthew Hammer, Tashana Beals, and Jade Bungie, and their teachers, Annette Vino and Emily McLennan. So please, welcome.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Bicentennial School in Dartmouth and teachers Annette Vino and Emily McLennan recognize that education is more than learning from books. And whereas Bicentennial School demonstrates that the best education is a true partnership between schools and their communities. And whereas Bicentennial School staff and elementary students recently celebrated the importance of participating in a supportive and proactive community by engaging in a celebration to foster closer home and school relations at the newly opened community centre at Scotia Court in Dartmouth. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates teachers Annette Vino and Emily McLennan and their elementary students for bridging the gap from classroom to family, friends, church, and townspeople through a wonderful community celebration, and thanks Bicentennial School for its commendable efforts to engage its community in learning. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, whereas Labour practice dictates that arbitration rulings which find for interested parties require government to honour the ruling with appropriate action, and whereas the 19 resident care workers who work at Townsview Estates, all of whom are women, have been waiting patiently for this NDP government to act on an arbitration ruling that would see their pay rates adjusted to reflect the nature of their work, and whereas on April 14th, the Minister of Labour met here with 2 union representatives and committed to looking into their concerns and getting back to them, but so far there is only silence. Therefore, be it resolved that the Premier, along with the Ministers of Health and Labour, along with the Minister responsible for status of women, acknowledge the pleas of the 27 residents who have written to them and honour the arbitration agreement required of them by law. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? No. I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Eskasoni's Parents Against Drugs group was recently honoured with a community award for efforts aimed at preventing crime and making communities safer. And whereas the group was formed in 2008 because of a prescription drug problem and the resulting negative effects, including crime and deaths due to drug overdose. And whereas the group's goal was to empower the community to take a stand against illegal drugs and substance abuse through marches in the community to raise awareness and support, which was so successful that the program was expanded to other First Nations communities. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly join me in congratulating Eskasoni's Parents Against Drugs group on their recent award and wish them continued success with their program. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mr. Bill Parrott will be retiring after 12 years as conductor of the Annapolis Valley Honor Choir. And whereas Mr. Parrott has influenced and enriched the lives of so many students and individuals through his love of music and passion for the arts. And whereas Mr. Parrott's passions for the arts has provided him the opportunity of preparing choirs for Symphony Nova Scotia, concerts with the Nova Scotia Youth Orchestra, master conductor for the Rotary Youth Choir in Halifax, as well as the Nova Scotia Youth Choir. And in May of 2008, Bill's achievements were recognized by the Westminster Choir College with the Alumni Merit Award. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly thank Bill Parrott for his dedication and passion for student learning and music, commends his exemplary contributions to the arts in the Annapolis Valley, for the positive impact he has had on so many lives, and wishes him all the best in his retirement and future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thanks. Whereas the Shubenacadie Art Connection, let's just start with that, was begun in 2009 by the Shubenacadie Canal Commission to promote the canal and the work of Nova Scotia artists who live and work on the waterway from Dartmouth to Maitland. And whereas this year 15 artists will showcase 29 works of art representing the Shubenacadie waterway, and whereas proceeds from the sale of the original artwork benefits Nova Scotia artists and the work of the Shubenacadie Canal Commission, therefore be it resolved that members of Nova Scotia House of Assembly commend the work of the Shubenacadie Canal Commission and the 15 Nova Scotia artists in ensuring the importance of the historic waterway is not lost to Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future date. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Entrepreneurs with Disabilities Network has named City Mines native Dan McNeil its Entrepreneur of the Year for 2010, and whereas the award recognizes and celebrates entrepreneurs with disabilities who have demonstrated business growth, innovation, passion, and persistence, and whereas Dan is mayor of our virtual town called OurTownEarth.com, with over 700 registered members, and the town is dedicated to helping people with disabilities through a social networking environment and also by putting people in contact with agencies or suppliers that can help them. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly join me in congratulating Mayor Dan McNeil for his recent award, and Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Antigonish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Creative Women Workshops Association, a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to strive towards gender equality by supporting, celebrating, and developing the talents of women storytellers for the screen, in conjunction with its partners, recently awarded its 2010 Women in the Director's Chair Feature Film Award to Lulu Keating. And whereas Lulu Keating is an Antigonish native currently residing in Dawson City, Yukon, who has been active in the Nova Scotia film industry, is a lifetime member of the Atlantic Filmmakers Co-op, AFC-OOP, and has served as president of AFC-OOP's Board of Directors. And whereas the Women in the Director's Chair Award, valued at nearly $100,000, will advance Miss Keating's feature film based on a true fantasy through in-kind rentals, production equipment rentals, and post-production support. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate Lulu Keating on receipt of the 2010 Women in the Director's Chair Award and wish her continued success with her future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the ground fishing in all of coastal Nova Scotia is being kept from rebuilding because of the overabundance of seals. And whereas many people think that this overabundance of seals don't eat fish that could hurt our ground fish stocks. Mr. Speaker, that is like thinking that cows don't eat grass. Whereas there is more evidence that with what few ground fish are left around the coastal waters of Nova Scotia are so full of parasites from the seals that the fish are becoming worthless for human consumption. Therefore, be it resolved that the Department of Fisheries work with the Federal Minister of Fisheries and come up with a solution to save the coastal ground fishery of Nova Scotia from extinction. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution.
Whereas the stage of the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee was recently under 2 feet of flooding of the Cumberland River. 2 feet that should never have stood on that stage. And whereas the Grand Ole Opry has been both a dream and a home to Nova Scotians, from Glencoe's John Allen Cameron, the first to play the Opry wearing a kilt, Port Hilford's Wilf Carter, Brooklyn's legendary Hank Snow, Spring Hill's Anne Murray, Bridgewater's Carol Baker, Big Pond's Gordie Sampson's Grammy-winning song, Jesus Take the Wheel, was sung at the Opry. And my own cousin performed there, Jack White of the White Stripes, who has Antigonish County roots. And MLA from Truro Bible Hill was on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. And whereas we share a common 480 million year Appalachian heritage, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House and the music of Nova Scotia immediately offer any help and support necessary to the people and music of Nashville and to the Grand Ole Opry itself. Mr. Speaker, the heart of music in Canada stands with the heart of music in America. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate, and until we can sing Raylene Rankin's We Rise Again, I ask that on this, perhaps the final day of this sitting, that we rise and sing a chorus sung by Wilf Carter. You are my sunshine, to brighten the spirits of Nashville.
Thank you. There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. We'll be singing "O Canada" a little bit later on. So, the honourable member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mel Chisholm, for 24 years, has served as an attentive bartender and non-judgmental listener at Henry House, a much-loved restaurant and pub on Barrington Street in Halifax. And whereas for 30 years he has shared his keen eye and knowledge of photography at Tarzan Mosier and as a small business person. And whereas Mel Chisholm's generous help to those in need and professionalism epitomize the value of hospitality, service, and good citizenship, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly thanks Mel Chisholm for his outstanding contribution to our community and decades of service at Henry House, Tarzan Mosier, and in his other pursuits. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May 4, 2010, 11-year-old Caleb Comeau of Concession, Nova Scotia, donated 16 inches of his hair to Angel Hair for Kids in Ontario. And whereas Caleb Comeau wanted to donate his hair so it could be used to make wigs for children with cancer, and whereas Caleb Comeau was very proud to be able to donate his hair that he has been growing for the past 3 years to the less fortunate who have been stricken with cancer. Therefore, be resolved that members of this House of Assembly congratulate Caleb Comeau of Concession, Nova Scotia, for his gift in helping children with cancer in memory of his two grandmothers, Yvonne Logan and Yvonne Comeau, who both passed away from cancer. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture introduced its first Farm Environmental Stewardship Award in 2009. And whereas 5 finalists for this award were chosen from across Nova Scotia for their dedication and commitment to protecting the environment. And whereas William McNeil, Salisbrook Farm in Windsor Forks was one of the 5 finalists for the first ever Farm Environmental Stewardship Award. Therefore be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly congratulate the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture for recognizing the outstanding work being done by William McNeil to make our province a better place in which to live. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the month of May at the Mill Village Consolidated School means the annual worm race, with students heading out the night before with flashlights and shovels to try and find the slimiest, the grimiest, and the fastest worm. And whereas this year, the annual worm race will celebrate its 40th year and will be recognized on breakfast television on Thursday, May 27, 2010. Whereas the representatives from the school will be students and worm racers Emma Wenzel, Riley Conrad, Zachary Ham, Austin Keddy, Desiree Rogers, William Evans, and Jordan Hahn. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly recognize the Mill Village Consolidated School on the celebration of their 40th annual worm race and the appearance of Emma Wenzel, Riley Conrad, Zachary Ham, Austin Keddy, Desiree Rogers, William Evans, and Jordan Hahn on breakfast television. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, whereas several residents and pets from the Bedford area have been diagnosed with Lyme disease, and whereas the source of this dangerous infection is from black-legged ticks in neighbouring Admirals Cove Park, and whereas earlier this session the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection offered to help with the advancement of the approval of the Y-Tex Ticicide for a deer baiting station, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House urge the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection to assist Halifax Regional Municipality to approve this effective and useful aid to combat Lyme disease. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas communities are built by volunteers, with contributions from both informal and formal volunteer groups estimated to be at $1.8 billion to Nova Scotia's economy on an annual basis. And whereas volunteer programs and communities are the threads that make up the social economic fabric of Nova Scotia. And whereas when it comes to active volunteerism, one only has to look at Victoria County and the tremendous community spirit that exists among volunteers, and no better example of that was shown than on the evening of April 20th when Victoria County held their 28th annual volunteer recognition night at Mackenzie Hall, Gaelic College in St. Anne's. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly take a moment and recognize Christine McCachran, Ruth Snyder, Sharon F.X. McNeil, Billy Campbell, Joanne Fitzgerald, Eugene Slick Osmond, Sylvia Nicholson, John Roberts, Ralph Annam, Billy Joe Robinson, John McIntosh, Ross McLeod, Donna McGregor, Sharon Proctor, Nina Connors, Evan Bonaparte, and Murdoch Morrison for their outstanding commitment to their communities and for their excellent record in volunteerism. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Eureka Fire Department is one of the most progressive and active volunteer fire departments in the province of Nova Scotia, and whereas David Hughes of Elgin, Pictou County has spent hundreds of hours volunteering in both emergency and non-emergency situations in the interest of residents of Eureka and surrounding areas, and whereas the Eureka Fire Department has recognized the dedication of David Hughes as the 2010 Volunteer Firefighter of the Year at its annual banquet held April 17th of this year. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate the officers and members of the Eureka Fire Department, and especially David Hughes for his outstanding work in his community by being named Firefighter of the Year. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the NDP government, with less than 1 year in office, has turned its back on government pensioners and employees by stripping away their pension indexing in this year's budget. And whereas the budget cuts have been disproportionately based on slashing pension benefits that retired employees have counted on to provide for them in retirement. And whereas this cost of living indexing was taken away unilaterally with no consultation, shocking pensioners, union members and other employees by its heavy-handed nature. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House remember the damaging impact that this change will have for 30,000 current and past employees and ask themselves whether this is indeed a better deal for today's families. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the local DeBert company, which began operation in the late 1970s constructing vinyl windows, today has become Atlantic Canada's largest window and door manufacturer, now employing over 300 people. And whereas Peter Kohler Windows and Entrance Systems has demonstrated dedication to the industry, has proven itself a leader, and has, at many different levels, made a significant impact on the Canadian economy in the window and door industry. And whereas this local manufacturer has been awarded an Industry Pioneer Award from the Canadian Window and Door Manufacturers Association for this dedication, therefore be it resolved, all members of this House of Assembly extend congratulations to Peter Kohler Windows and Entrance Systems for their contribution to the Nova Scotia's economy and for receiving an Industry Pioneer Award. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Lunenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Energy Around Us program aims to engage students in critical thinking about energy in our province and how energy resources are used and the effect they have on society, the economy, and our environment. And whereas the new Integrated Science and Social Studies unit will focus on renewable energy such as wind, biomass, hydroelectric, tidal, geothermal, and solar power energy sources in the hands and on the way that engages students in the renewable energy sources in our communities. And whereas the New Germany Rural High School, grade 9, is one of the only a handful of Nova Scotians implementing this renewable energy pilot program. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates the New Germany Rural High for implementing the Energy Around Us program, pilot program. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Les Béangeois, a dance troupe from Clare, recently participated in the British Association of Teachers of Dancing Festival of Dance, May 7th to May 9th, 2010. And whereas Les Béangeois placed first in their category, which included other dancing groups from Atlantic Canada, and had the highest mark for step dancing. And whereas Les Béangeois placed first amongst the Nova Scotia dancing groups that competed in the category of Nova Scotia traditional dancers, therefore be resolved that Les Béangeois be congratulated for winning the BATD Traditional Rose Bowl and for winning the Dance Nova Scotia Traditional Rose Bowl. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Allison Marie, a 22-year-old student at Dalhousie University, originally from Bridgewater, has joined the Cape Breton Clipper for the final leg of its journey in San Francisco, and whereas the Cape Breton Clipper is racing around the world and is currently in third place, winning the race across the Pacific, and whereas the Cape Breton Clipper has brought significant attention to Cape Breton Island and has created many economic development opportunities for the area, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly join me in congratulating and recognizing the achievements of the Cape Breton Clipper crew and congratulate Allison Murray for her adventurous spirit. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Guysborough Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia created the Community Spirit Award in 2007 based upon these 4 criteria: an ability to build on unique strengths within the community, a high degree of citizen participation in community projects of a wide variety, range and interest, clear evidence of community pride, a focus on creating an enduring community, and whereas the town of Canso in eastern Guysborough County brought together 15 community groups to apply for the Lieutenant Governor's Community Spirit Award, and whereas the history of the town of Canso and the communities of eastern Guysborough County show that each time they are faced with a task, community members will rally together and face each challenge with a sense of dignity, determination, and optimism. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates the town of Canso in eastern Guysborough County on being chosen as a recipient of the 2010 Lieutenant Governor's Community Spirit Award, and wishes these communities the very best as they continue on their voyage of maintaining a rich history and culture which has contributed so much to this province. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Booksellers Association's 2010 Libris Awards will be handed out on May 29th, 2010 in Toronto, and whereas Bookmark on Spring Garden Road has been named a finalist in the category of Bookseller of the Year, and whereas Woozles on nearby Birmingham Street has been named a finalist in the category of Specialty Bookstore of the Year, therefore be it resolved that members of Nova Scotia's House of Assembly recognize the outstanding achievements and contributions of Nova Scotia's independent booksellers and congratulate Woozles and Bookmark on being named finalists for the 2010 Libris Awards. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Leslie Reed of Windsor was one of only 12,000 Olympic torchbearers to carry the Olympic flame across Canada in the lead up to the 2010 Winter Olympics in British Columbia. And whereas Les was chosen based on an essay he submitted to a contest sponsored by Coca-Cola and RBC. And whereas his essay on the environment was focused on his work as president of the Pharmacy Association of Nova Scotia, when in 2003 he oversaw the introduction of the Safe Sharps program. Therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Les Reed for being chosen as a torchbearer for the 2010 Winter Olympics and thank him for being instrumental in the Safe Sharps program for our province. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John McDougall of Kenlock left an indelible mark on the music culture of Cape Breton Island, and whereas John composed what is believed to be an astonishing 45,000 fiddle tunes and played tunes with a reverence for how they were written, and whereas John dedicated hours of his day to instructing young fiddle players without charging a dime, he tuned pianos, rehaired bows, repaired violins, and he even found water for people as a diviner. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly remember John McDougall as a gifted composer, teacher, and contributor to the history of music on Cape Breton Island. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas food banks are a precious resource in many Nova Scotian communities, helping those most in need. And whereas on School Spirit Day held at Padeck Academy on April 28th, students and staff are encouraged to bring a non-perishable breakfast item or a box of cereal for the local food bank. And whereas as a result of this School Spirit Day, students amazingly overwhelmed the school with 154 boxes of cereal and 31 other items for a total of 185 contributions. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize the sincerity and genuine caring shown by students of Padeck Academy and for a job well done. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this week is known as National Nursing Week in Canada, and whereas this year's theme, Nursing, You Can't Live Without It, reflects the immense value of Canada's largest group of healthcare providers. And whereas this is an opportunity to celebrate Canadian nurses for their provision of outstanding patient-centred care and dedication to advancing the health system. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly join me in recognizing the valuable work that all our nurses provide to Nova Scotians on a daily basis, not just this week, but all year round. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Earth Week is taking place, a global week designed to encourage environmentally aware behaviours, and whereas ACAP Cape Breton, a local non-profit group that focuses on environmental and social issues, has planned a week filled with activities to raise awareness of environmentally sound practices to complement the hard work that they do all year. And whereas these include a repeat of last year's lunchtime cleanup day and an addition of an event called Eco Spies, where spies will go to different communities and award random people they see doing things to help the environment. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly join me in congratulating ACAP Cape Breton on the important work that they do to create environmental awareness and wish them the very best of luck with this year's Earth Week activities. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas tomorrow, May 12, 2010, health facilities and agencies, community health organizations, and public health units will celebrate Canada Health Day. And whereas May 12 was selected as Canada Health Day to mark the birthday of Florence Nightingale. And whereas for over 100 years, public health in Canada has helped individuals take care of themselves, their families and communities, and the major advances in life expectancy, overall health, and quality of life that occurred in the 20th century were the result of public health initiatives, producing vaccines, clean water, pasteurization, and better living conditions. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly continue to support and advocate for improved health promotion initiatives to make our province a healthier one. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the following resolution. Whereas Ivan Guy Levy, who was born on Little Tancook Island, will long be remembered for his love of the history and heritage of Lunenburg and area. And whereas Ivan was the oldest licensed barber in the province of Nova Scotia, who cut here for over 70 years and as recently as January 2010. And whereas Ivan was a skilled barber, it was his love of telling a good story and conversations around politics that will be remembered as part of a visit to the Magic Clipper Barbershop. Therefore, all members of the House of Assembly extend condolences to his family on his May 6th passing and recognize a life lived with passion for his work and interest. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice.
Agreed. There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. Any further notices of motion? Orders of the day. Just a friendly reminder as we go into question period that no electronic equipment during question period, and just to direct all questions and answers here through the chair. Thank you. The time now is 1:30, and we'll go to 2:30, and I'll recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. A few weeks ago, your government slashed the budget at the Hawsey Medical School by $2.5 million. To make matters worse, the Minister of Health and Education claimed these payments were made to the med school twice, and as a result, the reduction was correcting an error. Nothing could be further from the truth, Mr. Speaker. Financial officers at Dow Medical School have spoken to both the departments for the last 2 weeks and have confirmed that no such payments were made twice. Med school officials have contacted the Office of the Premier, informing him of the unintended consequences of the budget cut. So far, silence. So my question to the Premier, why won't your government simply admit it made a mistake and pay the $2.5 million back?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I can tell the honourable member is that negotiations are still going on between Dalhousie and the Department of Education, Department of Health. They're dealing with it, and they hope to come up with a resolution.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, an 8% operation reduction is considered significant. It automatically triggers a requirement of the med school to inform the American accreditation team of this budget impact. If the American team revokes its accreditation, the joint decision of Canadian and American accreditation could be affected. With 21% of our family physicians, 25% of specialists set to retire in the next 5 years, a med school that is not accredited will not be able to graduate students with a recognized degree. With research showing that physicians are more likely to practice where they are trained, and with a residency program relying on the undergraduate program, the ability of our province to deal with the retirement crunch is in serious jeopardy. So my question to the Premier, why do you fail to understand the negative impact of Dal's ability to supply physicians for Nova Scotians far outweighs your $2.5 million savings?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, we're committed to the Hawsey Medical School. We're committed to continue to train doctors, and we don't expect that will change anytime soon.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, the Dean of Medicine will be hosting a town hall with faculty, staff, residents, and alumni. And I will table a copy of a memo that was released today. At this meeting, he will be discussing the impact of the cut. There is no question that possible solutions to the budget crunch include increased tuition, cutting a significant number of staff, reducing the class size 2011, 2012. But Mr. Speaker, while these are significant, this is nothing compared to the spin-off effect to our province when it comes to the supply of physicians, which would result if Dow Medical School loses its accreditation. So my question to the Premier, will the Premier order today the restoration of the $2.5 million to Dow Medical School so they can get on with doing what they do best, and that's educating doctors for our province?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member. The answer to that question is no. I don't intend to order any such thing. There are negotiations, as I said, going on between the departments and the Dow Medical School. The medical school knows that there's an overall review. They understand that, and we expect that they will continue to provide quality education.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Premier. In the gallery, once again, behind me, we have representatives from Local 721 at Townsview Estates. They are seeking a resolution to their question of pay equity. Nearly 1 month ago, they were here in the House and met with government officials to discuss the same concerns. In the time that's followed, there's been no action by this government, and I will table at this time a document from Local 721 which highlights their concerns, and I will read from that. Since our last appearance at the legislature, the union has given a strike mandate by more than 90% of their members. So my question to the Premier is this: why are you forcing these workers to the picket line in order to get what is rightfully theirs?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Townsview Estates employees are employees of a private organization, of a private company. They are supported by funding from the Department of Health. We met with them previously. We tried to explain the position of the government. It is a very straightforward one, which is we fund a private institution. The collective agreement is between them and that institution. It's up to the institution to ensure that their pay scales and schedules are properly approached and paid.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, in your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all understand funding goes directly to the employer, and we all understand the funding comes from the Department of Health. An arbitrator ruled that these workers deserved pay equity. The employer has said it's prepared to pay it, and this government is unwilling to do its part to resolve the matter. It leaves the workers in the middle, and that is unfair. So my question to the Premier is this: when will this government provide the necessary funding to Townsview Estates so that these workers can be paid and the inequity can be corrected?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Townsview Estates is a private facility. The money is provided by the Department of Health to the private facility. It's up to them to negotiate their agreement with their workers and to pay according to the agreement that they negotiate.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, in your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On June 9th, 2009, the arbitrator's decision was rendered, but there's been no action by the government. On March 10th of 2010, correspondence to the Department of Health, no action by this government. April 14th, the workers came to this House and met with the officials of the government. No action by this government. It's now May 11th. Representatives are here again because this has not been resolved. These workers have tried to work through the process and get on with what they do best, which is provide quality care for the residents at Townsview Estates. So when will this government do what is right and provide the funding so the employer can honour the decision of the arbitrator and can pay equity?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's not true that there's no action. In fact, we continue to fund Townsview Estates in the manner that we have in the past. The government was not a party to the arbitration. It is between a private employer and their employees. It is up to the employer to meet the terms and conditions of their collective agreement.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For Canadians over the age of 50, the leading cause of blindness is age-related macular degeneration. Imagine for a moment, Mr. Speaker, you have been diagnosed with this condition. You are quickly losing your eyesight, but your ophthalmologist gives you hope. He or she recommends Lucentis, a treatment that will not only stop the progression of the condition, but as the added benefit of restoring sight you have already lost. So my question to the Premier, what would you do if you found yourself in that situation?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know. I'm not prepared to speculate.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, one option the Premier would do is access his own health plan. Listed as a possible benefit, Lucentis is available to all of us here in this House upon recommendations from a specialist with prior approval from our plan. Nova Scotians who do not have a generous health plan are not so fortunate. They do not have a program of last resort to rely on. Without a health plan, people needing Lucentis are forced to make tough choices. They are forced to choose between food, rent, or their eyesight, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Premier, why is it okay that MLAs in this House can access Lucentis, but hundreds of Nova Scotians cannot?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as the member opposite pointed out, I believe anyone with a plan that covers it would be able to access it. Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge that Lucentis is a valuable drug. We also acknowledge that we do not have the money in this budget to be able to cover it. We're looking for a method to be able to expand coverage, but you know, that means that either something else has to go or we have to be able to find the money within the current budget. And right now, that's not possible.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government had choices. They could have cancelled the tax break they gave themselves. They could have made an announcement to fund Lucentis with the anticipated $12.5 million in savings they will find in their pharmacare program this fiscal year as a result of the patent cliff. Instead, government is content to allow Nova Scotians without a health plan the inability to access Lucentis, safe in the knowledge that we can access it when and if we need it in this House, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Premier, given that it costs more to care for someone who is blind than it does to fund Lucentis, why is your NDP government still refusing coverage for a treatment that every other Canadian gets, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not true. There are jurisdictions that have said they will cover it later on this year. Mr. Speaker, we're not content. We're not content at all. We'd like to be able to cover any new drug that comes onto the market that provides positive health outcomes for the citizens of the province. But that means being able to find the money within the budget to be able to cover them. I would think that that is something that the Leader of the Opposition would understand.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Time is ticking in Sydney. The dredging of Sydney Harbour is the #1 priority of the Sydney and Area Chamber of Commerce, is the #1 priority of the Cape Breton Partnership. The municipality has committed $2 million to the project. So my question to the Premier, what are you doing today to ensure this project, which is essential to the economic future of Cape Breton, makes the deadline for the federal infrastructure program?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad that the member opposite raised this question. In fact, we are in almost daily contact with the federal government to try and determine whether or not they have any commitment to this particular project. The minister responsible for transportation and infrastructure renewal wrote to Minister Baird. I think he also copied Ministers McKay and to Minister Ashfield. As of yet, we have had no reply. This is a federal harbour. It's their jurisdiction, and it's a federal harbour. And so we're waiting. We need to see what their commitment is before we can determine what, if any, contribution we would be expected to make.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The unemployment rate in industrial Cape Breton area is more than 16%. Dredging the Sydney Harbour is essential for growth. Nova Scotia Power supports the project. It is linked to the success of the Cape Breton Railroad. The business community supports it. The missing link seems to be the political will from this government to make it a priority. Mr. Speaker, the municipality has come forward with dollars. My question to the Premier, what financial assistance will you be willing to commit to this project?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's pretty straightforward process. This is a federal harbour. We want to know what their contribution is, and therefore what we would be called upon to contribute. Now, we would like to see this project go ahead. We've made it clear to all parties concerned that we think it's a project that's worthy of support, but it is a federal project, and therefore the lead role on this stays with the federal government.
The Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is a community priority. This is a community project, not a federal government project. It is a community-driven project, Mr. Speaker. It has taken It has taken considerable effort, dedication, and cooperation to get this far. An environmental assessment has been done. A competitive quote for dredging by a dredging company is in, and the timeline is to be announced. What is missing is money from this NDP government. So my question to the Premier, will the Premier commit today to ensuring this money is assigned for the dredging of Sydney Harbour before the other funding is lost?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have any idea how the Leader of the Opposition could expect a commitment when we have no idea what the federal government is prepared to commit to this project. You know, why would you ever do something like that with a federal project? It's an inexplicable request.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Justice. Will the minister confirm that he was quoted correctly in Friday's Chronicle Herald when he said, and I quote, "Guns have no use other than to kill or maim people"?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And it's been 3 weeks, I think, since the last question I had, so I'm looking forward to this one. The part that you say there, you'd have to take the total context of of what was said in the interview. There's absolutely no question that guns are designed to kill and maim. That's part of the purpose of the design. But if you look at the total part of the discussion we had, there's a lot more detail at the time.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North, and your first supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we confirm that the minister did say guns have no use other than to kill or maim people. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know how the minister could make such a statement when there are 87,000 hunters in Nova Scotia who put $35 million into Nova Scotia's economy annually. What is even more difficult to believe is when he was interviewed on 95.7 News and replied that in hunting, quote, "the animal is the only loser." I want to know, does the Minister of Justice and his NDP government now want to get rid of hunting here in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, first, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member. He doesn't have his wording correct. I think if he goes back and checks the record, I don't recall saying the word people in that statement. The other point is that people are free to hunt in this province. There's a process in place for that. There's also a cultural base to hunting in this province, which we respect. This government respects. But this minister, and I'll make no mistake about it, we are going to take strong steps to move forward to remove guns from the street and in the hands of people that are causing some of the chaos in our communities. And I'm asking you to join me in that fight.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North, and your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And through you again to the minister, obviously he doesn't correct when he's quoted on a matter, yet he doesn't say that is the case here in the House. Mr. Speaker, as the minister would know, despite the huge waste of federal taxpayers' dollars, now in the billions, are you and your government on side in support of keeping the National Firearms Centre and the registration of all long guns? And if so, why?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's an interesting question. We'll leave that to the federal government to put their position forward, and we'll examine the issues and how that government moves their issues forward, and we'll look at the impact in this province, and we'll make decisions that are best for all Nova Scotians.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question today is for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, in March we were told that a decision to provide a subsidy to the Cape Breton and Central Nova Scotia Railway would be made by the end of April. On March 23rd, Mr. Speaker, the Premier had this to say, and I quote, "It's difficult to talk about subsidies when you're in the middle of negotiating. That's just where we are." Close quote. Well, it's now May 11th, Mr. Speaker, and still no verdict from the Premier. My question to the Premier, what are you doing with negotiations, and when can the people of Nova Scotia expect a decision on this important subsidy?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think it would be very wise to get into the substance of negotiations on the floor of the House of Assembly. What the member needs to know is that those talks, discussions, negotiations are ongoing. We hope to be able to reach a reasonable conclusion.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Cape Breton South and your first supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the only thing that's probably certain is that we'll be getting out of this House today, and then we won't have the opportunity to ask the Premier, at least in this place, about where the subsidy is going and whether or not this government is even interested. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read another quote. On March 19th of this year, the Minister of Economic and Rural Development said, and I quote, "If they don't get the money, I would suspect what will happen is that Rail America will just let the spur line go to wherever spur lines go when they die." Close quote. That's from your Minister of Economic Development. Seems like the minister is pretty relaxed about this situation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this railway is central to the economic stability and development of Cape Breton, and the NDP government must address this matter immediately. My question is to the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. When will your department announce a decision on whether to provide a subsidy for the Cape Breton and Central Railway?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in a somewhat relaxed way, I will say this, is that when negotiations are complete with Cape Breton Rail, an announcement will be made. And we're very, very pleased with the current relationship that we have with Cape Breton Rail.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South and your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess when the decision is certainly not imminent, the demise of the railway is. That's the problem I have. You know, we're waiting for this government to escape from this place and hide from the legislature from now on. We're faced with a situation here where a lot of important questions affecting Cape Breton Island are left unanswered by this NDP government. Mr. Speaker, it seems as if the Premier and his government have forgotten about the railway victims as well. The Deputy Premier met with the Victims Association on April 18th. On that day, Mr. Speaker, he stated his government would review the victims' situation and come up with new options. It's been almost a month, Mr. Speaker, since the Deputy Premier met with the association, so my question to the Premier is this. What are these new options discussed by the Deputy Premier, and when will you resolve the situation between the railway victims and Rail America?
Yeah. The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a result of the meeting, which the member noted, those options have been taken into account by the department. As I've said, the negotiations are underway with Cape Breton Rail, and we understand that there has to be a balance between those. So, Mr. Speaker, that work is proceeding.
The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Premier. Yarmouth and Southwest Nova are in dire economic state. The Regional Development Authority has been cut off from funding. There's no permanent regional director for the Department of Economic and Rural Development, and the effects of the CAS demise has caused job losses and substantial reduction for businesses located in Southwest Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier, Team West or Team Southwest aside, things must occur in this part of the province to help this region's struggling economy. When will you support a functional development authority to assist in Southwest Nova?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to the member opposite. They understand that there's a new regional development authority that is being constituted. There are specific rules that are going to be in place to make sure that, in fact, it is functional, and the fact that it is accountable for the work that it does. And, of course, Mr. Speaker, that work is underway.
The honourable member for Argyll on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, like all my colleagues here in the House, we're here to fight for the people of our communities who are very concerned about their future and that of their communities. Small businesses who have had a tight bottom line are now looking at closing in the new harsh economic realities of Southwest Nova. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier. What programs can be put in place to help these businesses of Yarmouth County who may not be able to weather the storm until a new ferry can be in operation in 2011?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not new, harsh economic realities. It's economic realities that are due to the ineptitude of the former government in dealing with the economy of Southwest Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the reason why we have a Southwest Team Southwest Nova, the reason why we have dedicated resources to that is to ensure that there is in place an economic strategy for Southwest Nova Scotia that will support those very businesses that he's talking about, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Argyle on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, the problem I have and the other people in Southwest Nova Scotia have is that with this NDP's government, is that they have not a plan in place when they killed the cat. Yeah. The NDP government has also been slow to address the fallout of the cat. Yep. Mr. Premier, the people and the business owners of Yarmouth County are hardworking, but they need to help to weather the storm that your policies have had a hand in creating. Mr. Speaker, my question, the business owners need a plan and programs to help their businesses to stop more job losses. When we will see something of substance from your government to assist the struggling businesses?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite is behind the times. I thought in fact, I know he was in Yarmouth the day that I was there, meeting with the council, announcing the and further investment made in the promotion of tourism in Southwest Nova Scotia. That is going ahead. In fact, it is targeted actually at the maritime market, which is where Southwest Nova actually draws its tourism from.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. Parents who have children in the Tri-County Regional School Board are concerned by a recent school board decision there to separate grade 7 and 8s from grade 9s to send them to two different schools, one in Yarmouth and the one outside town limits. Now, this decision will cause many students to move schools multiple times as they move through the school system. Parents of children who have disabilities are particularly concerned about this effect on their children. The board was attempting to reconfigure grades until a new high school is built. Does the minister agree with the board's decision?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, under the Education Act, boards have the ability to reconfigure grade levels within their school system and also to change school boundaries. And they do this in the attempt to improve upon the programming and accessibility for all students within their system. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the parents are particularly concerned about the way they found out this decision. They actually found out about it on Facebook. They didn't get a notice from the school board or anything. Mr. Speaker, the Tri-County School Board hired Dr. Gunn to recommend an appropriate configuration for the schools. Now, parents have been told this report cost nearly $30,000, and now they say the board chose not to follow Dr. Gunn's advice. So my question to the minister, does she feel it is appropriate to ignore Dr. Gunn's advice?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, the Department of Education encourages boards to research issues. I understand that they've been looking at this possibility for a number of years, and certainly Dr. Gunn's report would be part of that homework that they've done. Certainly within the department, I've heard from advocates on both sides of that issue, and there seems to be a number of reasons why the board went ahead with that reconfiguration. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government intervened in the school board process just a few weeks ago when it told Halifax Regional School Board that it would be willing to meet to discuss a school in Eastern Passage, despite recommendations from board staff that a school not be built there. So now we've got a school board decision that has divided a community. My question to the minister, is the government going to intervene in this school board decision?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would be the last education minister, I think, to interfere in the mandated and justified decisions of school boards. During my time on the school board as chair, I actually resigned as board chair because of provincial government interference. I value the independence and the role of school boards, and I will certainly give them the opportunity to do their work. On the other hand, I do encourage boards to explain to the community what their rationale is for decisions and to meet with them as often as necessary to make sure that there is two-way communication. Thank you.
Good job. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is for the Minister of Education. Nova Scotians right across our province are excited that the 2011 Canada Winter Games are going to be taking place here next February. And schools in the Halifax Regional Municipality are being closed for 2 weeks that month to allow facilities to be used by athletes. At least 2 school boards that we know of have requested the extended spring break to allow their students to participate in or attend the games. These requests have been denied by the Minister.